Hello, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Sophia Ihezwe, and I am the Product and Training Lead Assistant for the Nigerian Dynamics 365 User Group community. We're super excited to have you all at today's introductory class to Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. So, in this session, we'll be learning all about the General Ledger module, also all about the account payable components, and also how to perform daily operations in account payable module for the Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. We're going to have a very intense training that will teach you all about the introductory basics to Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. So our training instructor for today's session is none other than Komi Siabi, who is also popularly known as Musiowina. Hi, Komi. Great to
Yeah,
have you.
hi.
Hi, great to
Yeah,
have you
thank
at
you.
this session. All
Yes.
right. So, before you go right into the training, Komi, I would like you to give all our audience a brief introduction as to what is Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, okay? So that they can even know like what the application is all about and the benefits of using the application, right? Okay.
All right. Okay, so just like
Hi, Komi.
Sophia said, hi. Just like Sophia said earlier, my name is Siabi Komi, and I'm a Dynamics 365 F&O technical consultant. All right, so today we're going to talk about Dynamics 365 F&O. So, what is even Dynamics 365 F&O? F&O is simply an ERP that helps companies to manage their finances alongside their operations. So it's an ERP or a solutions where you can do all your financial operations. And you can also do things like your purchases, your sales, your human resource activities, commerce, project management, so on and so forth. All right. So Dynamics 365, it's a group of applications where we have Dynamics 365 Sales, Dynamics 365 Business Centrals. We have Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. So these are all part of the Dynamics 365 group, but they have what they do specifically. So today, we're going to be talking about D365 F&O. So, like I mentioned earlier, F&O rather is an ERP, and ERP simply stands for Enterprise Resource Planning that big
Okay.
companies use.
Sorry to cut in, Kumi. Thank you so much for that introduction. Okay, so from all Kumi has said, we can see that Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation is basically an application or a tool rather that businesses use to manage their HR processes, their finance processes, and their supply chain processes as well. So with this in mind, we can see that it's very important. Knowledge of this application is very important. And it doesn't matter if whether you're an end user or a business owner or a consultant or even a developer as well. It's key that we know how to use this application. So I'm going to take myself out from the from the background and allow Komi to walk us through this application in a detail. All right. So Komi, the floor is yours. All right. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you very much, Sophia. Thank you. Okay, so let's begin. All right. So, like we mentioned earlier, in Dynamics 365 F&O, we can do things like human resource activities, finance, commerce, supply chain, and project operations. But for today, we're going to be focusing more on the finance part of F&O. But before that, a little bit of introduction of what the system is all about. We're going to talk a little bit about the architecture of F&O. How do we have access to this application? How do we log in? So F&O is a cloud-based application, which means we have it on the cloud and is a web-based application. So to have access to this application, we need the web URL, we need the user login, which is on email, and the password. F&O is a Microsoft application, so simply means that we can have access to this application using our Office 365 credentials. So we're going to be talking about how do we get started with D365 Finance, how we can configure basic things like currencies, how we can create physical calendars, physical years, periods in finance. We also talk about how we can plan and how we can configure our chart of account in Dynamics 365 Finance. We're also going to be seeing how we can configure ledgers and journals in finance, because journals are key things when it comes to financial transactions on the system. So we'll see how we can configure journals like the general ledger journal, the fixed asset journal, the vendor payment journal, the customer payment journal, and some other journals on the system. Then we'll also see how we can perform some general ledger daily procedures like trying to post into different GLs. And we'll talk a bit about how intercompany accounting works in the 365 finance. So we could have a group of company, and together they can use the system where we can see how we can, at the end of the day, post our intercompany transactions. We'll also see how we can configure ledger allocations, how we can work with accruals. And lastly, we will see what periodic processes are in Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. So we're going to look at the benefits of using D365 Finance, and we'll talk about the overview financial management features that we have here. So the truth is, with D365 Finance, we are able to accelerate our business growth. We are able to cut all the paperwork. We are able to follow best practices processes right on the system. All right, so with this, we are able to empower employees with role-based workspaces. So if you are an account payable clerk, you are a sales manager, you are a warehouse manager, you have access to things that are specific to your roles, your job function. So you don't have to see all the things. And the other thing we have here is that it helps us to streamline our functionalities, like I mentioned earlier. And with this, we are able to get value based on the job role that have been assigned to each employee on the system. Yeah, of course, we have the popular Excel, Microsoft tool, which we use to format data. So D365 F&O is seamlessly integrated with the Microsoft Excel application, where we can easily import or export our data to Excel from the application. So in finance, here at the middle, you can see that we have the general ledger. So the general ledger is able to talk to different modules on the system, starting from the budgeting module, the production control module, the PM and accounting module, the payable, the receivable, even your inventories are all coming together into the general ledger, right? When you try to post an inventory transaction, at the end of the day, it flows into the general ledger. So here, this illustrates the typical processes that can happen in the general ledger module. So here, we can do our closing, we can close our transactions for the year, we can maintain our ledger account. So let's say there's a new ledger that comes in, the financial person can go into the system and create the GL code and assign names to this GL code, and also do some mappings that will be used automatically when we are raising the transaction on the system. Now, as part of the finance module, we also have the cash and bank management workspace. Here, we are able to maintain details about the company bank accounts, whether we have a local currency account or a foreign currency account on the system. We also have the tax module. The tax module, of course, help us to automatically calculate tax based on some sales tax code that have been set up on the system. And these are applied when we are doing transactions like sales orders, purchase orders, and these tax amounts are posted into the respective accounts that have been set up. Of course, we can't talk about finance without mentioning the account payable, where we handle our vendor transactions. So before we are able to post vendor transaction, there are some basic setups like the vendor groups, the vendor posting profile, vendor payment options like the payment days, the payment term, the payment schedules, and also we are able to maintain charges, right? We're able to maintain charges, discounts as well on the system. So on the account payable, we are able to record vendor invoices, we are able to generate vendor payment, and we are also able to perform settlements on the system. Okay. Then the account receivable is also part of the finance module where we treat things that relate to our customer, like customer invoices, customer income payments, shipping of our items, so on and so forth. Then we have the credit and collection module. Right. Companies that are into trading that sell goods, of course, we have customers that we deal with. There are some delinquent customers that are very hard to deal with. So we have this module that help us to track our customers. We have this aging report that track customers that are owing the company for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So the credit and collection module is well designed to even send out collection letters to these different vendors, and we can customize these collection letters rather based on a category of customers or group of customers to be able to recover payment from them. Then we have the budgeting module. The budgeting module helps us to effectively budget for each department or each unit for the year. So at the beginning of the year, every department come up with a budget, it goes through approval, and this budget is uploaded into the system. And we can turn on this budget on different part of the system when it comes to things like purchase orders, purchase requisitions, expenses, cash advances. And the system is able to put a control on what a department or even an employee can spend in a month, in a quarter, or in a year. Then we have the fixed assets module. In F&O or finance and operation, we can cater for our fixed assets, be it tangible or intangible assets. We can cater for them on the system. So the fixed asset module help us do that, where we can bring in our assets, we can do asset acquisitions, we can run depreciation on them based on the different depreciation methods that we have as standard. We can also dispose our assets by selling them or by scrapping them. Then we have the cost accounting module, which is used to collect data from various sources from the system. So this data could come from the inventory module, the general ledger module, or we can even bring data from external sources. At the end of the day, the cost accounting module helps us to see how we are doing, how our books are doing, and it helps the organization to make some decisions which are not just decisions in the air, but informed decisions. Yeah, then we have the electronic invoicing. With the electronic invoicing, we are able to design some template as end users. So without the help or without the intervention of developers, we can use this to build inbuilt reports for ease integrations to come up with templates that we use based on the country where the system is deployed. All right. So this takes us to our very first question. We've talked a little bit about what we can have in finance and operation. So the number one question says, which functionality in finance help companies to manage delicate customers? So I spoke about this earlier, and I mentioned that we have a special module, which is the credit and collection modules that helps us to track, send emails, do follow-ups with our customers to be able to retrieve our funds. Number two says, which functionality in finance helps companies cancel wrong deposits? Okay, so we have the cash and bank management module where we can easily track or maintain details about All right, great. So I have an answer from Nanjaga in Malta. Good. So the answer for, I believe the answer was for number one, which is credit and collection. Great. So for number two, the answer, of course, is cash and bank management module. Now let's move on to number three that says which functionality in finance help companies to prioritize payments received. All right, so and we have the account payable module that it's used to treat vendors. Of course, our vendors, we are the one making payment to vendors. But for payment that we are receiving, this payment go to the account receivable module. So number three answer is account receivable module. All right, so moving on. Here, we've been able to see the benefits of finance, of Dynamics 365 Finance, and we've been able to see the various modules that we have in finance and the overall features and functionalities. Also, we've been able to talk about how these modules work together, and of course, these finance modules, some of them also work with the supply chain management module where we have things like the product information management, we have the procurement and sourcing, we have the inventory module, we have the transportation as well. So now we're going to go proper into the system. So let's have a short demo and let's even see what this application looks like. So permit me to share my screen. Let me share my demo environment. Okay, share. Share screen. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Good. So like I mentioned earlier, I mentioned that it's a web application. So you need a URL and you need your Office 365 credentials. So here, I'm going to log in. And voila.
Okay, before we continue, I just want to recognize most of our audience that are joining in. So we have Adedotun and Ashili joining in from Finland. You're highly welcome. We also have Niger Girl joining in from Malta, and we have Chesco Global Solutions joining in from Lagos, Nigeria. Okay. I think some of our audience are saying that your presentation is not so clear.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Um,
I have a comment from Richard saying that the presentation is not too clear.
okay.
Okay, could you
So
reshare the
can,
slide?
yeah, yeah. So I think I will do that. Let me stop sharing. Okay. So I'm gonna share. Hi, Rebecca from UK. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen now. I'm sharing the browser. So please confirm that you can see that.
Yes, we can see it now.
Exactly. Good. Excellent. So now this is what finance and operation looks like once you log on to the application. This is the landing page or the home page, so to say. So here we have the application name, which is finance and operations. So at every point in time, when you click on this, it brings you back to the home page. In the middle here, we have a search bar where we can search for pages across the entire system. And here we have USMF. USMF is simply the name of the company that I'm currently logged on. So this application could be deployed for company XYZ. So it's going to be displaying the initials of this application, of the company rather. And on the drop down, we can have different companies, but here we call them legal entities. So I could have a group of company in which we have different legal entities. So in this case, Contoso is the name of the group of company. Then we have legal entities like Contoso Entertainment System USA, which is USMF. We have USP2, USPI, USRT, so on and so forth. So, as an employee, I can be given access to different legal entity in the same company. All right. Then we have the Action Center. The Action Center simply is a page where I can see all the notifications that I have for me. So let's say there's a purchase order waiting for my approval, or my subordinate want to go on leave. So all will be displayed here. Then next to it, we have the setting icon, and I'll just talk about the user option for now. When you click on the user option, you have the option to change the color of the application, right? So let's say, for instance, the colors of my company, Mosewina, are dark orange and green, so I can decide to go with orange. Yep. Then here we have preferences. Under preferences, you can decide to pick the default company you want to log on into. So we have DAT, USMF, so on and so forth. Then we also have the language. So being a robust system, we can decide to change the language from English to French, for instance, as we please. Then we can also define the default date, time, and format, which is going to drive anything we are seeing on the system when it comes to date and time. All right, so I'll move on to accounts. Account simply displays information about my user profile, like my user ID, my name, my email address. Then under the workflow, here, there is a setup here that I can check to tell the system that I want to receive email notifications that are coming from this application. And I would also like to receive notifications on the action center that I mentioned earlier. Then beneath it, we have delegation. Here, users are able to delegate their workflow or their work items when they are probably going on leave. All right, now let's come back to the home page by clicking on Finance and Operation. On the left-hand side here, when I click on this, we have modules, workspaces, recent, favorites, and the home. The home icon and the Finance and Operation, they both do the same. Now, let's come back to the middle here. In the middle, I have things that look like dashboard, right? So these are called workspaces. Workspaces are simply mini dashboard that shows me things that are peculiar to my job task or my job function. So take, for instance, bank management workspace. Here is going to display things that are partaking to banks on the system. And when I go to benefits, for instance, I will see my employees' benefits. And that's me logging in as a human resource manager. All right. Then let's come back to this icon here, which opens modules. So like I mentioned earlier, here we have finance and operations, the financial part and other operations. So the modules start from account payables, receivables, asset leasing, cash and bank management, consolidation for um, groups of companies, cost accounting, cost management, credit and collection, so on and so forth. We also have the human resource module for our HR guys. Now, I am able to see all of these modules because I log onto the system as a system administrator. On a live environment or on production environment, you'll be limited to some modules based on what you are supposed to do on the system. All right, now let's dive into uh, our next item, which was how to set up currencies on the system. So we have a module here called the General Ledger module. When you click on it, it opens another page or a modal page that shows different menu items. So I can decide to collapse all or expand all. So let's move straight to currencies. So currencies, we have currencies and we have currencies. So this will open a page which we call forms. So this open the currencies form. So here you can see all the currencies that we have available on the system, the currency code, and the currency name. All right. Now, let's assume that I don't know the path to currencies on the system. I can simply use the search for a page functionality where I can say currencies. So the system is able to suggest where I can see currencies on the system. So I can go through general ledger, currencies, or I can click on it straight up, then it opens the page for me. Okay. So to create a new currency that doesn't exist on the system, we have the new button to create. All right. Here we have what we call the action pane. So the action pane is where we have things like the new button, the edit, the delete, so on and so forth. Okay, so I'll go back to the slide. If we have questions or comments, we can chip them in. I hope I am still being heard. Can you guys still hear me? Okay, I believe so. Okay, good. So Rebecca said you can still hear me. Good, good. All right, so back to my slide. So we all know what currencies are, of course. For your system to be functional, you need to define your currencies, especially two of them. So we have the transaction currency and we have the reporting currencies, right? So the transaction currency simply is the currency that we use in our day-to-day transactions. So for a country like Nigeria, for instance, the system currency is the Nigerian naira. So let's assume that we have a parent company somewhere in a country where the currency is euro. So that will serve as the reporting currency. So you will agree with me that this currency setup is very, very key before we can even start posting transactions on the system. So here we'll look at the different type of currencies. We'll talk about the concept of triangulation currency. We will see how we can set up legal entity currencies and conversions, how we can configure exchange rate providers, and how we can even import exchange rate providers. All right. So currency is simply the unit of measure for money. So for some countries that are specific to gender when it comes to words, currency has a gender. So when you take countries like France, for instance, or Spain, they attribute gender to all the words they have in their language. So here we have currency gender, which is used for Spanish-speaking countries or region. Uh, Only one currency can represent the triangulation currency. So what is the triangulation currency concept all about? So I'll use the Naira and USD as an example. So we all know that we have a direct exchange rate when it comes to Naira versus USD. So one USD could be 100 Naira or 200 Naira. That's a direct conversion. Now, there are some currencies of some countries where you don't have a direct conversion against the dollar or against the euro. So you have to go through a third currency. So in that case, we talk about the triangulation currency from currency A to B, then back to C, instead of going from A to C directly. So we also have that functionality on the system. Okay, so exchange rates is very, very key. So I've defined on the system that my system currency is Naira. Then I have a transaction that has to do with USD. The system should be able to see an exchange rate to be able to convert this USD currency into Naira. So we must set up currency exchange rates on the system. And we also have um, exchange rate type. So I could have an exchange rate type for my daily transactions. I could have a different exchange rate type for budgets, for any other things on the system. So we are able to set up different exchange rate type. And in this exchange rate type, we can define different exchange rate conversions. All right. So I mentioned that we have two major currencies when setting up the system. We have the primary currency, which is the transnational currency. Then we have the secondary currency, which is also called the reporting currency. So that takes me to my next quiz, and it says, what type of currency is known as ledger currency? And what type of currency is known as a secondary currency? So let's take the first one. We can drop our answers on the chat. All right. So the ledger currency is the same as the company currency or the primary currency. That's the currency that we want to be trading in. Then the secondary currency is the reporting currency. All right, so here we've been able to talk about the different type of currencies in diversified finance. We also touched the concept of the triangulation currency, and we also talk about how we can set up legal entity currencies and conversion. So we're going to do a short demo on how this thing is done on the system before we move to how we can create physical calendars and physical period on the system. So back to our demo environment. All right, so I come to General Ledger module, currencies. Now, we want to set up the major two currencies after you have created them on the system. So we go to Ledger Setup, Ledger. So here you can see that we have accounting currency. Then we have the reporting currency. Okay, so the system says select the reporting currency for the ledger. Then here the accounting currency. So without this setup, believe you me, you can't post any transaction on the entire system. So let's look at how we can configure the currency exchange rate type and also the currency exchange rate. So here, exchange rate type, these are different exchange rate type. We have the default, we have the budget, we have the closing, we have the constant. So we have different exchange rate type. Now, to set up an exchange rate itself, we come to general ledger, currencies, currency exchange rates. Click on it. Yeah. Then here you can see that we can set up the exchange rate based on the exchange rate type. For default, so let's look for USD to Euro, for instance. So here it says 1 USD is 73 Euro, and this is from 1st of December up to 1st of December 2013 rather, up to date. So if the exchange rate changes, I can just click on add, select the date, which is 16th of September, and the exchange rate now is 90, for instance. So going forward, any transaction that has to do with euro will be converted using this exchange rate. That's because the accounting currency for this environment is USD. We also have the functionality of exporting exchange rates. Instead of me coming here to update the rate on a daily basis, we can simply use an API to import the exchange rate on a daily basis. So to do that, we simply come to General Ledger, module, currencies, then import currency exchange rates. So here we can select the exchange rate type. Let's say this is default. Then we can select the exchange rate provider. So I have to first of all bring in the exchange rate provider by coming back to the general ledger. So let's come here. Let's look for provider. So we have exchange rate provider. Good. So here, let's pick this. So this is where we define the API key. So I will copy the API key here and bring it in. So once that is done, the system is able to use the API key to get the exchange rate for me automatically on a daily basis. Okay. So that's that about exchange rates. Now let's move on to physical calendars and physical period on the system. So I move back to my slide. Good. So create physical calendars, physical years, and period. Good. So in finance, we have physical calendars, we have physical years, and period. So depending on the country or the organizations, the physical calendar could be over a period of 12 months, 10 months, or even 20 months. So it depends on the organization or the country. Basically, a physical calendar is made of 12 period or 12 months. So this month are being looked as period. So we can start a physical year from January to December, or from March, the current year, to April, the next year. And the reason we're able to break down this physical year into period is to be able to have different period where we can say we are not posting into this period, we are posting into this one as we get into that particular period. So we're going to talk about the difference between, okay, so where is the API for Owanda Farm, please? So I can share that with you. A minute. I will try to get it and share with you on or before we finish the class. Okay, so let's proceed with our slide. All right, so the physical calendar provides a framework for the financial activity for an organization. So like I mentioned earlier, the calendar simply helps us to track the different framework that we have in an organization. Now we can break down these physical years into period. Now, an organization can have different physical calendar or a single calendar. So it depends on how many legal entities we have and how we want to manage them. So if I have just one legal entity, I could just create one physical calendar. Then in that physical calendar, we could have different physical year, which can further be broken down into different period. So we're going to see how we can create a physical calendar shortly. All right. So after the physical calendar has been created, we need to set that up on the ledger. So let's go on to Dynamics, General Ledger, Ledger Setup. Then we have physical calendars. All right. So here, these are the different calendars that we have on the system. So based on the legal entity, like I mentioned earlier, this is a physical calendar for Thailand. This one is for China. So when you open it, you would see the years in that particular calendar. Then we can see the different periods that are attached to the calendar. So basically, ideally, we have an opening period, then we have a closing period. So the opening period simply shows that we are opening the period for the year and we don't post into this period, right? So you could see that this is a calendar of 12 period, yeah, and there is a 13 period, which is the closing one. So each period starts from the beginning of the month to the end of that month. Okay. So once we have our physical calendar created, the next thing we need to do is to come back to the ledger setup where we select the physical calendar for the system. Yeah, so without the physical calendar, you also will not be able to post anything because while posting, the system uses the date of the transaction to locate the period, and that period is tied to the physical calendar. Okay, so we also have date intervals. So date intervals are also key in setting up the system. So Date intervals basically help us while we are running a report. So you can see here we have things like the current period, we have the year to date, we have next year, we have previous year, we have previous year to date, so on and so forth. So based on the title we are giving it, there are intervals here that we can set up that will define what results we will get when we use this data interval somewhere on the system. So these come into play when you are running your financial report, or you're even trying to run your budget report to see what the budget and what is the actual of that budget. Okay, so back to our slide. Now let's go into budgets. Good. So budget cycle time spans. So we mentioned earlier that part of the finance modules, we have the budgeting module. So here we are able to define our budget for the organization. So we have budget cycles that define the length or the time during which this budget is being used. Budget cycles can include part of a physical year or multiple physical year. The budget cycle time span defines the number of periods that are included in the budget cycle. Good. So when you have a budget running on the system and a transaction is being made that is tied to a budget, the system checks the budget cycle first of all and see that which period are in this cycle and automatically picks to check the GL if you actually have funds available for you to go on with this transaction. And based on the setup, we can get warning while we are running a transaction that oversees our budget, or we can decide to tell the system to stop the user from proceeding because the transaction is overshooting the budget. Yeah. So when the periods are created, the financial controller can decide to close a particular period. But instead of closing those periods, we'll rather put them on hold. Let's come back to the system and let me show us this period. Okay, so here, so I'm back to my screen. Good. So here you could see that this period have the status open, and based on the legal entities, we have different option. Now, I can decide to say, I want to put this period on hold. So take, for instance, we are in the month, this is period 2, right? So period 2 is simply February. Now, we are currently in March, and we don't want any entry to go into the previous month. We can put the period on hold, not close it. Because when you close a period, we can't open that period anymore. So when you put it on hold, it restricts users from posting into that period. So in case there's any correction that we need to bring back into the previous month, we can easily come back and open the period and make any adjustments. All right. Now, we can close a period permanently, maybe after a year or after a 2 or even 3 years, because we are sure that we have closed our books, audit has been done, and nothing can be posted into that period anymore. So we can decide to close the period permanently. Also, for future period being in September, it's advisable to close period in October so that we don't post into the future. So with this functionality, we are able to put periods on hold, we are able to close them, and we are able to reopen them as well. Okay, so now let's go back to the slide. So I spoke about date intervals. Now, let's come to the next skills that we have here. Please confirm that you can see my slide. Okay, just a minute. Let me come back with my slide. Okay, good. Okay, so how can a physical calendar be copied from one legal entity to another? Yeah, so we can copy a physical calendar from one entity to another by simply specifying that physical calendar on the ledger setup. So, of course, all the entities that are on the system are able to inherit that physical calendar. Now, the next question says, how many open period can you have in a physical year? So we talked about that. How many physical calendar? How many opening period rather can we have in a physical calendar year? Okay, so the answer is 1. Then the next one says, how many closing period can we have in a physical year? We can as well have one closing period in a physical year. All right. So here, we've been able to discuss or were introduced to physical and ledger calendars, how we can create these physical calendars, how we can also see that we have different periods that can be broken down into the physical calendar. So we also look at years, period, and date intervals, and how we can also use these date intervals. So before we round up, we'll have a short overview of chart of accounts and how we can create ledger accounts on the system. So you all agree with me that the chart of account is a very, very required component when it comes to setting up finance on any system at all. So we'll define the and configure chart of accounts. We'll talk about financial dimensions and dimension sets, chart of account main accounts, main account categories, templates, ledger account aliases, and balance control. So straight up to set up our chart of accounts, we go to the general ledger module. So let's me share that. Let's go back to our demo environment. Okay, so come to general ledger, chart of accounts, then main account. So here on the main account, we are able to create specific GL accounts. Then on the chart of account, the chart of account is simply a book or a group of GL accounts that have been brought together. So here we have different chart of accounts. This one is Chinese chart of accounts, French chart of accounts, India COA or chart of accounts. And each of these chart of accounts, they have different main accounts. So we can come to the main account window to create this GL account. And when we are done, we can then map them to the specific chart of account. So if I map account A, chart of account that are specified on a particular legal entity, I can't see other ledger accounts that are not part of that chart of account. Okay, so we will stop here for today, and if we have questions, we can quickly get them. Okay, before we end the session, let me go back to the slide while we ask questions if we have any. Okay, waiting for your questions. Those of us joining from YouTube, anywhere you can drop your questions. We have 4 minutes before we end today's session. Okay, so just a little bit of summary. Today we looked at how we talked a little bit about introduction to Dynamics 365 finance and operation, and we mentioned that F&O is simply part of the application that are available in Microsoft Dynamics 365, right? Then we focus more on the F&O, and with F&O, we have different activities or different modules like the human resource application, the finance application, the supply chain, the project operation, and the commerce. So today we focus more on the finance part, and we saw how we can set up things like the currencies exchange rates, currencies exchange rate type. We also talked about the triangulation currency concept. We looked at what are physical and ledger calendars, physical period, which could be months or years, and we also talked about the date interval. Also, we had an introduction to the chart of accounts and main accounts on the system. I hope we've been able to learn something today. So I will see you next time. Thank you and bye.